That's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. If we can just, yeah. Oh, now I'll see. Ah, there we go. Okay. These are just a few places I've been. So I'll just say a few words about the link between domestic violence and mass shootings, and then I'll talk about the demographic that Dottie and I work with, people that have a lot of power and money and influence and abuse those things. And then I'll talk a little bit about the pathway to violence, and then flip it on its head and talk about pathway to freedom for the ladies we work with. I'm a teacher by training, with a degree in English literature. What else are you going to do? And then I have the state certification in domestic violence advocacy. I'm not a therapist, I'm not an attorney, but I do trainings for therapists and attorneys because they don't get a lot of education on domestic violence, so we try to supplement that. And I'm going to be talking about affluent abusers, and it's, can you hear me okay? Am I talking? Here, you're supposed to hold it like an ice cream cone. Right. So I'm going to be talking about this small subset of affluent professionals. Most people, don't you think most people in the world are good people? I hope we're not all getting a jaundiced view and thinking everybody's a perpetrator or a victim. But I think most people in the world are good. I think most people with power and money use them for good purposes. But I'm talking about this small subset of affluent professionals who use that power and money and influence to control and coerce. I'll tell you some stories because I'm Irish and I can't help it, but I'll tweak some of the details to protect the innocent and the guilty. It's important to acknowledge that men can be victims too, and it's even harder for them sometimes to reach out to get the help they need because it really strikes at the core of their identity as a male when they are being abused by a male or especially a female partner. But I do want to acknowledge that men can be victims and women can be perpetrators, but just because from the statistics we have, it appears that 85 to 95% of victims are female. So when I refer to perpetrators, I'll use the pronoun he. When I refer to victims or survivors, I'll use the pronoun she, but I do want to acknowledge that men can be victims and women can be perpetrators. And I'm going to be sharing stories with you that are going to sound anecdotal, and that's because they are, because we don't have a lot of data on this demographic yet. But I'm happy to say there is a researcher called Megan Hasselschwert, a professor at a university out in the East Coast, and she and I and some other people are collaborating on a study to provide more research and data on this population. Where do we get most of our data? We think it happens primarily in the lower economic classes, but we get most of our data from police stations, hospitals, domestic violence agencies, the very places that people in this demographic tend not to seek out for help. So, just a few words about the link between domestic violence and mass shootings. This was a study that was analyzed by the FBI, and it showed that with mass shootings, that over half of them involved a spouse who was a victim in the shooting, and 16% of them, of the perpetrators, had previously been charged with domestic violence. So the intimate terrorism, so Steve was talking about domestic terrorism, intimate terrorism of domestic violence and mass terrorism share a common goal to provoke fear and assert control. Here's some examples. The Kansas workplace killing, restraining order. The Boston bomber, domestic assault and battery. Planned Parenthood, arrested for rape and sexual violence. The church shooting in Texas, he had abused, assaulted his spouse and child, cracked the skull of his little baby. So what they have in common often is that need for power, control, and to instill fear. So now, what does a typical abuser look like? Can you see in the back? I don't know if we can turn off any of the lights in the back, but can you make out this fellow? Can you tell me what he's wearing? What does this guy have on here? Can you all say it? White beater, yeah. Doesn't he look like the most likely suspect? But look at all these other guys. I can't pronounce this guy's name, but he was a college student, ended up killing his college student girlfriend. Who's this guy? Chris Brown. Look, he's got a puppy. This guy, Ed Dow, a wealthy developer down in Los Gatos. Remember him? We'll see him later. This guy, Steve mentioned him. Who's that one? Ray Rice, the elevator, cold cocking his girlfriend. G, we'll talk about him in a moment. Jerbash Shalal, you familiar with him? San Jose resident, now in San Francisco. You might have heard about him. Bob Bashara. What's this in the background? Yeah, all right, we'll talk about him. Who's this guy, everybody? Okay. This is Dr. Martin McNeil, MD after the name, very impressive, bow tie. And George Hughley the fifth. Anytime you got an initial after somebody, I mean not an initial, Roman numeral after somebody's name, you know they come from somebody, some background of influence. George Hughley was a national champion lacrosse player, and he ended up killing his national champion lacrosse player girlfriend, college student. Yardley Love, you heard of Yardley Love? Her family, in order to make meaning, some kind of meaning out of the tragedy that happened to her, sponsored the development of an app that college students can use called My Plan. Steve was talking about the danger assessment. From that danger assessment, we get My Plan that college students can use to assess the level of danger in their own relationships. Okay, so let's look at some of these people. Well, in a minute. Here are the people that I work with. My ladies, these are the backgrounds that they tend to come from, and some men too that I've worked with. Engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents. These are the ladies I work with. Here are their partners. Oh, look at this. Engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents. Anybody can be a perpetrator. Anybody can be a victim. Did I just do that?
Sorry, I'm trying to restore connections because you have several videos.
Oh, don't worry. Oh, okay, don't worry about it. I'll just, yeah.
You want to show your videos?
Well, if it works, yes, but...
Okay, so you can go ahead and use the smaller screen while we figure this out, or?
Okay, sure. Okay. So let's look at power and control dynamics in any demographic tend to be the same. Power and control. But the more money, the more power somebody has, the more resources they have at their disposal to exert that power and control. Folks, I lost my slide.
You did.
Okay, so when people have a lot of power and money and influence, they can make it very hard for women to leave safely, to get custody of their children, and to maintain anything close to their previous lifestyle. You know, folks, maybe we can just hold it till the end. Don't worry about it.
Will you here?
No. Let me just scoot along here. Yeah, let's just, if we can figure it out later, we won't, but it's like, it's interrupting my creative flow. So let's talk about the characteristics of an affluent abuser. Whoa! Okay, yeah, forget technology. Jeez. Okay, they tend to be highly educated. They tend to have an advanced. These are the characteristics and behaviors that I've developed after working with over 1,200 women and 8 men now over the last 7 years. They keep telling me the same story. In our support group, sometimes a lady will say, "I think we all married the same man." So they tend to have they look very good on paper. Positive public image, pillar of the community, they present well in public, they're often involved in philanthropic work, they'll contribute to worthy causes, coach their son's soccer team. They are also charming, calculating, manipulative. They come from all races. They tend to define their children in terms of their accomplishments, their GPA. Here's what tends to motivate them: sex, money, winning, revenge, power and control. It's not like for so many of my ladies, it's love, negotiation, settlement, compromise, and they make the mistake of projecting the qualities they have onto their partner. It's a different set of values that their partners have in life. They also tend to have this sense of grandiosity. It's all about them. Everything revolves around them. They need to be the center of attention. And they're also very good at convincing everybody that their partner is the crazy one. Their partner is the abuser. More things. I'd like you right now, before I read the rest of these, or list them, to put on your own therapist hats. So how many therapists do we have in the room? We have Steve, you too. Yeah, we have everybody. So for all of you, let's just play the game and pretend you're a therapist for a moment. When I do my trainings with therapists, I say, I'm not a therapist, I can't use diagnostic labels, but you are. Well, let's all put our therapist hats on now. And after I describe more of these characteristics and behaviors, you tell me what diagnostic labels you would put on these people. Okay? So they lack empathy. Oh my gosh, go to the head of the class. Wait a minute. Awesome, A+. You're okay, good. So yes, lack empathy, lack remorse, lack self-reflection. They lie easily. They lie often. They lie convincingly. Oh yeah, it's just recorded a little while ago, and the lady's saying, you know, he's been whenever we have sex, he's been recording it. Now he's showing videos of our intimate occasions to other people and making it look like I'm doing strange things when it's really him. And then the judge says to him, "Is that true? Did you have a camera in the bedroom?" And he said, "No, Judge, I never had a camera. I would never have a camera. Absolutely not. I never had a camera in the bedroom." And then my savvy survivor says, "Well, you know what he did have? He had something called Loom on his iPad that he was recording these sessions with." So you see how he told the truth? No, he didn't have a camera. He had an iPad, and he had turned it into a monitoring device. They are good. They are really good. And they'll include like precise, truthful details. They'll weave the truth in with the lies to make the lies look more authentic. I've talked to forensic psychologists, and they have told me that you cannot tell a seasoned liar. They are that good. They will look you in the eye and they will say, "It's midnight and it's snowing right now," and you'll believe them because they're that good. They tend to blame their partner for everything rather than take responsibility themselves. They lack self-reflection. They lack accountability. They typically never acknowledge their own mistakes or abusive behavior. They always have to be right. They would be the last people on earth to ever label themselves an abuser. They minimize and they deny the damage they do. They maximize behavior of the other partner. Are you starting to recognize some people you know? Is that yeah? Okay. They're very good at playing the victim. Think of Oscar Pistorius, Blade Runner, walking around on his stumps in the front of the jury to show, "Oh, poor me, I'm so helpless, I don't even have legs. How could I have shot my girlfriend on Valentine's through the bathroom door?" Well, dude, what's your legs have to do with your ability to reach for a gun and shoot your girlfriend? But they're good at playing the victim. And they're very good at shaming others. God forbid you should ever shame them. You could be taking your life in your hands. So we have labels like, can you say it loud and clear, Anka?
Antisocial personality.
Antisocial personality, thank you. Anything else come to mind?
Cluster B, borderline narcissistic, antisocial, and what's the fourth one, cluster B?
Yeah. Did you say narcissist?
What?
Histrionic.
Histrionic.
All right, go to the head of the class. Awesome. All right, you nailed them all. Okay, so we go back to when Steve was describing all the different categories of abuse, and that last one, the antisocial category. In that study, they said that approximately 25% of perpetrators who participate in batterers intervention programs fall into that category, and they tend not to benefit from this program, except they do benefit, as Steve said, they learn how to be abusive without getting arrested. So here is my hero, Judith Herman, again from Trauma and Recovery, saying, here's how the abuser operates. In order to escape accountability for his crimes, the perpetrator does everything in his power to promote forgetting. If secrecy fails, because abuse thrives in secrecy, silence, and isolation, right? The perpetrator attacks the credibility of his victim. She's crazy. She's an abuser. She attacked me. If he cannot silence her absolutely, he tries to make sure no one listens. So dead on. Okay, speaking of perpetrators. Okay, remember Bob Bashara? Here's what he said. How could I have killed my wife? I'm president of the Rotary Club. Okay, yeah, you're president of the Rotary Club. You know what else you are? Here's what one of the jurors said. Monster, narcissist, sociopath, master manipulator, arrogant, pathological liar. He paid his handyman to strangle his wife. Why? Here's what her sister said, Jane supported him, and she was committed to him, and she would have done just about anything for Bob except open up her 401k. It is this reluctance to allow him access to her life savings that ultimately led Bob to kill her. Follow the money, and you will often follow the motivation. Yeah, this guy. Okay, G. Jawaz Shalal. So he grew up in San Jose. He was a victim of hate crimes growing up, discriminated against. He's of Sikh origin. He dropped out of high school, and like many high school dropouts in Silicon Valley, went on to create a company that he sold for $300 million. He also created a nonprofit, and he donated $1 million of that to fight hate crimes, given his background. And he went undercover in San Francisco and donated $35,000 to a shelter in San Francisco. Sounds like a great guy, right? Here he is on Oprah, and she's singing his praises and going, and he's single, girls, and they're all swooning. There he is talking to Charlie Rose. Oh, speaking of perpetrators, huh? Yeah. There he is up on the top of his high-rise there, with his initials. He's got his initials over everything. Are you waiting for the other shoe to drop? Ha! Domestic violence conviction, not once, but I do that over my shoulder. Okay, I'm getting good at this. Technology is my friend. Okay, twice. He was caught on tape, on video, hitting and kicking his girlfriend 117 times. They were able to, the police took the tape and they weren't able to use it because they confiscated it quickly without getting a warrant. But I understand why they did it, because these guys are so good, they can remotely wipe things if you don't get them fast. So anybody hear about the case? Of course, I bet you did. Neha Rastogi, that's the case that went viral. She's a high-level executive at Apple, beaten by her husband, a high-level executive at Cisco. Did you catch that? Did you see it on her iPhone as she's filming him slapping her? She has an innocent question about a bug on a website that she had visited, and he turns that innocent question into an interrogation session. And then he got off with a light sentence because they were concerned about his immigration status. And it was that case that went viral that led NBC to call me and then invite me to go on the Megyn Kelly show. And then here is, remember I talked about, or mentioned, Ed Dow, the developer, and his wife, Carmen, with the blonde-haired daughter. He ended up killing himself and their 22-year-old son. He would beat her for putting highlights in her hair, for buying a new dress. Emotional abuse, what does that look like in the affluent community? It can be very subtle in the way they do it. So I had a lady who was asked by her attorney, why don't you let me fight harder to get a fairer settlement? I could get so much more for you than you're letting me go after. And now she's still living with her husband, mind you. Why? Because he's taken total control of the assets. We think that it doesn't happen in this community. We think if it does happen, then she should have a little money to look after it herself. But many times, her partner has taken control of the financial assets, and she is strapped financially. So she was continuing to live with her husband, the physician. They're going through the property settlement phase of dissolution, and the lawyer's saying, why don't you let me fight harder for you? And she goes, well, you know what he told me the other night over dinner? You know what he said to me? He said, you know there's more than 40 ways to kill a woman and make it look like she died from natural causes. So she backed off, got much less than she was entitled to. Another lady, her husband was not just a physician, but he also had a black belt in martial arts. You know that you can inflict enough internal damage without showing any external wounds that you can end up killing somebody, and you can give them tremendous pain. He would just hurt her, cause internal bleeding without any external wounds to show for it. One of my other ladies, I sound like I'm sort of bashing physicians, I don't mean to. My dad was a doctor and he was a wonderful man. Again, remember I'm talking about that small subset of people who abuse their credentials, abuse their profession, abuse their power. One of my ladies whose husband was a doctor, this is how he would terrorize her. He would say, you know how I'm gonna kill you? I'm going to inject you with a poisonous solution between your toenail and your toe in a way that not even the coroner will think to look. then I'm gonna chop you up into little pieces. And then he would threaten to slice his son open with a scalpel. So I checked with the coroner about, is that possible? The toenail injection? Yes, that's possible. There are more than 40 ways to kill somebody and make it look like they died from natural causes. Oh, you think those are just anecdotes? This is a story that made the news. Dr. Martin McNeil, remember the bow tie? It was an almost perfect murder, pumped her full of drugs that he knew would be difficult to detect, and he would brag to his former mistress about how he could kill somebody and make it look like it was natural causes. And here's what his own daughter said after he was convicted of murdering his wife this way. His own daughter said, "We're just so happy he can't hurt anyone else." There he is in prison. He ended up committing suicide in prison. Affluent abusers often misuse their credentials. So another one of my ladies, she said, the last time my husband tried to kill me, her husband's a psychologist, I called 911. He kept her up all night. He was flinging plates at her. He had a knife. He was threatening to kill her and telling her in great detail how he was going to do it. So she called 911, and he got out in the driveway before the police arrived. Her husband, the psychologist, you know what's going to happen. He got out in the driveway with the police before they got to see her. And he said to the police, "Thank God you're here. My wife's having another one of her psychotic meltdowns. I'm a therapist, and I really believe for her own safety and for mine, she needs to be on a 5150 hold. Please help me to help her. You know how they can turn it off. They'll go from ranting and raving, a knock comes to the door, and they can turn it off like that. Please go in," and they find her looking how? How's she looking? Pretty crazy, huh? And beside herself with terror. So what happens to her? Her hands get slapped in restraints. She's carted off to Valley Med. Oh, I forgot to mention, she'd been talking about wanting a divorce from her husband. God, it's not a good idea to give him that kind of heads up, right? So he comes to visit her at in the hospital in the locked unit she's in. And she says to him, "Why did you do that?" And you know what he said? "Because I can." So the New York Times interviewed me for a story about the abuse of technology in middle to upper income areas. And I'm going to do a talk for the Domestic Violence Conference in October. October 5th, you all going to the Domestic Violence Conference? Friday, October 5th, be there. You're going to be square in Cutie Museum in Mountain View. Friday, October 5th. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the abuse of technology. I kind of call it gaslighting 21st century style.
Save the dates will go out, I think, next week for that.
Sorry, what was that?
The save the date for the conference is going out next week.
Awesome. So it's easier to believe somebody's crazy than that all this other crazy stuff is going on. I have a lady who's being pursued by a drone. Doesn't that sound crazy? But we don't have like anything regulating that. So here's the thing. Occam's razor says, well, what's Occam's razor? Anybody know? Yes, the simplest solution or answer is probably the correct one. But if you talk to the physicians at Stanford, they're going to say, when I hear hoofbeats, I think zebras. Sometimes it's a zebra, sometimes it's not a horse. So when you're looking at somebody who's telling you a story that sounds pretty crazy, she could be crazy. You're right, she could be crazy. But she could be being stalked in very subtle, devious, technically very sophisticated ways. She could be crazy and being stalked. She could be crazy because she's being stalked. So any one of those four things could be true. And I've had ladies who've ended up on psychiatric holds. I had a lady who was very religious, and she ended up on a hold, and they said, do you want an attorney? And she says, no, God is my advocate. And they see her on her knees, and they're writing, patient has religious delusions, preoccupied with godlike figures. So if you are only looking at things through one lens, what's that saying? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But I think it's so important to have like a team approach where everybody's perspective can be heard so we get at the truth. Otherwise, you get things like I've coined this term engineered restraining order because it's happened so often with my ladies. Ending up on a 5150 hold, perpetrated by their husband. Often there's money involved. Often she's told him she wants to leave, and then he wants to show her who's boss. With the engineered restraining order, So if we look at the whole context of the relationship over a period of years, if she's been living in terror, then one night he might keep her up all night and be flinging plates at her and threatening to do all sorts of horrible things. And she might lose it. She might do something. She might reach out and touch him. She might throw something. Something might happen and the police are called. He might scratch his own face. He might hit himself and cause a mark. Call the police, and then they come and they ask who's the dominant, what they try to find out who's the dominant aggressor here, who struck the first or the worst blow. And she could end up, I've had many ladies end up in jail. Many ladies end up with restraining orders against them. These are doctors, social workers, therapists, real estate agents. They come from all walks of life, just like all perpetrators can, so too with the ladies I work with. The problem there is just looking at that isolated incident, that moment, like even in the domestic violence protocol, like I'm on the review committee for the Santa Clara County Police Chief's domestic violence protocol, and they are supposed to look at the history. And it's hard to make that decision. If somebody's got wounds, if somebody's got to go to jail, I understand that, mandated arrest. But it really is important to take a moment to ask about what's happened before. Who is really in fear here? What's been going on? Because otherwise, the wrong person could end up suffering as a result. I talked to Nancy Lemon, who teaches law at Berkeley, and she was kind of the driving force behind Family Law Code Section 3044. And when I told her what I've been noticing over the last few years, she said, yes, that's like looking at the snapshot of the relationship as opposed to the whole movie. So finding the truth, these are things to consider. Who's been reaching out for emotional support over the years? Who's seeing a therapist, going to a support group? Victims often tend to minimize the abuse, try to explain it away. Victims are often reluctant to get a restraining order. They're afraid of making them mad, afraid of losing their family, of the shame that's involved. They still love them often. They look at who's got the financial control in the relationship. Not always. Some of my ladies are the primary breadwinners, but it's worth looking at. Is there control of resources going on? Can you look back and see, is there a context of control, abuse of power in the relationship? And just statistically, it's more prevalent amongst women, for females to be the victims. And even size. In the protocol they say, take a look at the size differential too. Size does matter. And then looking beneath the surface doesn't just protect her, it protects the children too. Because if the wrong person, if truly it's the male in the relationship who's the perpetrator, here are the statistics that show that they are more likely to be physically abusive towards the children, physically abusive towards the partner, and it also increases the risk of sexual abuse for the children. I've had ladies who have lost custody of their children, and they've ended up in the custody of their professional, highly respected partners who have ended up sexually abusing those children. Okay, we've got a little X there, you know what that means. Next slide. Technology. Yes, so let's look at some of the things, some of the ways that our ladies are stalked, coerced, controlled, and made to feel like they're going slowly mad. Even in your car, if you've got OnStar, it is watching you. Here we go. These are electronic locks. So we had a lady who was a literal prisoner in her own home. They had locks on their gated house, locks on their gated entrance to their 5-acre estate. He would change the code on the locks every day, so she was not able to get out. I had a lady who said, how is he breaking into my house? No sign of forcible entry. He's stolen all the hard evidence that I had of what was happening. He had a little bump key. Looks like a little modern skeleton key that he was getting in. There's the drone, lady being pursued by a drone. So I had a lady who was from Los Angeles, and she fled her perpetrator and moved up to the Bay Area. Now she's in her Mercedes, and she says, cars are computers on wheels nowadays. And so here she is with her, in her Mercedes, and she's issuing a voice command to her GPS to take her somewhere in the Bay Area. And that voice command gets overridden by guess whose voice? Her husband's voice directing her back to LA. How freaky is that? You can put all kinds of malware on phones, so you can turn the phones into listening devices, cameras. I had a lady who said, how does he know where I am all the time, even when I leave my cell phone at home? Well, he had put a GPS device on the car, a little tracking device. And some of these have engine cutoff technology on it too. Oh, I've had ladies who've been monitored in so many different ways, recorded, because you can do anything you want in your home, right? Ladies who've been filmed in the shower, in the bathroom, in the bedroom, hidden cameras, put in smoke detectors, and light fixtures. They could be anywhere. Coat hooks. Oh my God. Is nothing sacred anymore? Barbie. So Barbie's a smart doll now. So I can have a little conversation. I'm a little 9-year-old girl. Oh, Barbie says, what school do you go to? There's a restraining order against Dad. Oh, I go to blah, blah, blah. Dad is not supposed to know where I live now because, you know, the protection order in place. And where do you live? And I live in here, and I'm like my school. And what do you dream about? What's your favorite color? What do you do after school? What are your activities? That conversation is getting uploaded to the cloud, and if I have the password, I can hear the conversation afterwards. And if I'm a perpetrator, I can say to my little girl, I don't care what stupid questions Barbie's asking you, I just want to know when's your mom coming home, and who's with her tonight. Make sure you tell Barbie that. So, watch out. These dolls like this, have been banned in Germany, because they can be used as surveillance devices. Even Legos, for goodness sake. Camera and Legos. Oh, where did I put my clicker? Oh, Sandy, just put my, and this, there's another form of gaslighting, right? You come home and you always know you put your clicker or your keys in a certain place, right? And then you come back later and the keys are gone. And you say, oh, honey, did you see my keys? No, I didn't see your keys. And you come back later, keys are here. Oh, look, I found them. And he goes, what? You can't even keep track of where your keys are anymore? You are really losing it. You know, so, getting inside your head, making you think you're going crazy. Did you ever see the movie Gaslight with Ingrid Bergman? Oh my gosh, that movie holds up very well. So now we have modern ways to make people start to doubt their sanity. Oh, yeah, and then you can hack into people's Facebook pages or websites. I've had ladies who run their own companies and their partners have hacked into their website and said the most outrageous things. So here is Rosalind Polycarpio. She worked at McAfee. She was a nurse murdered by her partner. But before he did that, he hacked into her Facebook page, and here's what he said on it. Rosalind, I am cheating whore, Polycarpio. It's a shame. Stalking. Steve talked about stalking and how dangerous it is. And we don't take it nearly seriously enough. We don't. So here's a really important statistic. We're not saying that 80% of everybody gets stalked gets killed. We're saying that when you couple it with domestic violence, 80% of domestic violence victims who've ended up getting killed have been stalked prior by their partner. Sometimes you think your every move is being watched. Why? Because it is. Financial abuse. So many of my ladies have been cut off from their finances. These are women that used to live in nice houses, and now I've had ladies living out of their cars, floating from friends to friends' house, trying to scrape together something to make ends meet. So types of abuse, putting her on an allowance, punishing her for overspending. I told you about Carmen Dow getting beaten for putting highlights in her hair, buying a new dress. What do you call it when an employee steals money from an employer? What do you call it when a husband steals the life savings from his wife, or vice versa? Yeah, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Why don't we have a better answer for that instead of crickets? Legal abuse. Often, here's what happens. He's not able to perpetrate it up close and personal anymore, so the abuse the power and control gets transferred from home into the legal arena, taking her back to court over and over again. My God, I had a lady whose husband spent $2 million taking her back to court, trying to seek custody as revenge. Suddenly, this is the child that he was neglecting or being abusive towards before, and now suddenly he can't bear to live without being with little Johnny, and even making the little crocodile tear fall. Disneyland, Dad, it's fun at my house. He'll go after custody, not because he's suddenly fallen madly in love with his child, but often it's used as a way to get back at mom and avoid having to pay, as much child support. So what does a domestic violence victim look like? Any one of these, they're all domestic violence victims. Some, the ultimate victim. Remember as I was showing you our rogues gallery of abusers, the upper left one, I said I can't pronounce his name. That was the college student that killed his college student girlfriend, Carly Halls. Carmen Dow, we talked about her, Miss America. Here, Yardley Love, I told you about that My Plan, the application for college students. Yardley, who suffered the ultimate tragedy being involved with her boyfriend, George Hughley. Leslie Morgan Steiner, best-selling author, Harvard grad, domestic violence survivor. You recognize her? Whose wife? Yes. And you recognize her? Whose girlfriend?
Chris Brown.
Thank you. Yes. And Eliana Lopez. Oh, here, closer to home, domestic violence here in our valley. Juliana Alaris, finance manager at Apple, stabbed to death Christmas Eve. Beware of intimate occasions, especially, remember Valentine's Day with Oscar Pistorius, Christmas Eve? Perpetrators tend not to do intimate occasions because they don't do intimacy. Why is she silent? Why doesn't she reach out? So many reasons, but often his status in the community, things look so good on the surface, who would ever believe something was going on behind those closed doors? So often they feel they won't be believed. And even if they do reach out for help, many of them, I hardly know somebody that lives in an abusive relationship without suffering from PTSD, but it has a tremendous impact on every aspect of your being. The way you recall events. She might leave out important details. I had a lady, I took her to the police station, and she said, she was talking about all the things that had happened. She forgot to mention that he had threatened that afternoon to run over her with his car because she was busy thinking about how he had strangled her 2 nights ago. But leaving out important details can affect her credibility, but it's what they do when their brains are not working correctly. They might laugh inappropriately after describing something that happened. They might be really over the top, or they might have a flat affect. That can be a consequence. All of those can be a consequence of PTSD. But it impacts their credibility if people are not trauma-informed. And we talked about why they don't call the police or why they recant. There's so many reasons why. The shame, the fear they won't be believed, financial dependence. We talked about the danger increasing after they leave. The more money that women's partners tend to have, the more afraid they are for their own lives, thinking that if he doesn't kill her himself, he can hire someone to do it. Back to Los Gatos and Carmen Dow, she even had a restraining order against him, and she was afraid that he would use the children to punish her. Just like what happened with Sandy, as I told you about earlier in the Megyn Kelly show, here is what happened with Carmen, using the child just to torture her for the rest of her life. So just a few words I want to say about our Pathway to Violence is a very helpful paradigm that was created to get a picture of what a potential perpetrator looks like and what path they're on as they're planning to take revenge for a perceived grievance. And you can often see the trajectory, and it's not like you can say, it's like heart attack risk. You can say, if you've got this sort of thing going on, this is a likely occurrence. It's not foolproof, but it gives you an idea of where somebody is on that path, so you can take preventive measures and do intervention. They could have a grievance against somebody, like they've got a restraining order against them. They feel like they have to take justice into their own hands. So they start to think about what that might look like. They might start researching, planning, thinking about ordering one of these 3D guns online. Did that happen yet? 3D printer guns? It was held up for a moment, but they're talking about being able to, already 1,000 people have the blueprints to create a gun, an unregistered weapon. Then maybe he knows where she works, thinking about where are the exits and entrances, what does the security system look like there, maybe seeing if he can get through security. Leakage is like maybe talking to his friends about it, or maybe saying some mean things about her on Facebook, and then seeing if he can get right by security until finally he has that, the attack happens. So the leakage, the threats, it's really important to take threats seriously. There's the intimacy effect, it's called. The closer you are to somebody, the more seriously you should take those threats, as opposed to just saying something about a politician or something. So I took that paradigm, the one for targeted violence, and I flipped it on its head, and I call it the pathway to freedom, and I use it with my ladies to help orient them on their own path. It's like, when you go to any big shopping mall and you see a big map and it goes, "You are here," it helps you figure out where you're going, where you come from. Where have they come from before entering that path? Often years of denial. Red flags begin to accumulate. It gets harder and harder for them to deny what's happening until they reach this point of dawning awareness that becomes an epiphany. If they don't reach that stage, typically over time the cycle of violence becomes a downward coil of violence, spiraling downward with more and more frequent periods of abuse, fewer periods of peace, feeling more and more isolated, more and more attacks on the identity, self-esteem, feeling of self-worth, this feeling of helplessness, futility that takes over. Have you ever seen Not Without My Daughter? That horrible movie where one of the other ladies that was over in Iran, she had given up, until what ends up happening often is at the bottom of that coil, death or total subjugation of the spirit. So the alternative to that is this recognition, this dawning awareness of, as Steve talked about, I can't fix this. I can't fix him. I can't fix our relationship. I need to do something or I'm going to die. It's going to kill me slowly, death by 1,000 cuts, or some other way more quickly. So then you have that epiphany that this is abuse, I don't deserve it, I need to leave. And then what comes after that? That is the death of the dream. And now what? So moving through that to, well, maybe I can start reaching out. Maybe I can do some research online, learn about what does abuse look like, what's gaslighting, what's traumatic bonding, what's Stockholm Syndrome. Learn some language to put on this. Oh, that's coercive control, that's financial abuse, that's gaslighting. Once they start to build a vocabulary, they start to get a sense of power over their situation, and then maybe they start to reach out even further, maybe call a hotline. Maybe visit a domestic violence agency, maybe join a support group, maybe pick up with an advocate, maybe start interviewing attorneys. Pre-escape preparation, maybe they start to look for an apartment, someplace away from where they are. Maybe they start to interview attorneys and actually hire an attorney. All of this is reversible if their partner doesn't find out. So it's the reverse of a typical relationship that just doesn't work out. Because with power and control issues, with fear and shame, and with tremendous things at stake, the stakes are very high. The less he knows, the safer she'll be. And as long as she doesn't confide in him and tell him her plans, then she can go back and forth on that trajectory. Like Steve was saying, they often go back between 5 and 10 times. So it's a backward-forward movement here, but please just know, as court officials here, or people that are intervening in any way, your intervention will be more or less effective depending on where she is on this path. If she's just reached this epiphany and you want her to to testify, that's going to be pretty scary for her. If you look around here at the oval that's encompassing this path, it's self-care and outside support. It's very hard to live with an abuser. It is almost impossible to leave without outside help and support. So if she can start gathering that support, friends, safe friends who understand, an attorney, a domestic violence advocate, a therapist, outside support. If she can start training, going into training, it's like Rocky, you know, the rides and the milkshake and running up and down the stairs, you know, punching the cow carcass in the butcher shop. She is going to be fighting the fight of her life for her own freedom and possibly for her children's freedom. For the chance, the opportunity to live free, to live safe. Like domestic violence it's in microcosm a form of oppression that's practiced out in the world, where we go in, we invade other countries, we take over them, we silence them. This is what's happening in her own home. Her own kingdom has been taken over by a tyrant. And now she's trying to escape. She's going to be a refugee for a while. But here, if she can plan her escape carefully, thoughtfully, methodically, not letting her prison guard know that she's planning to break out, then the safer she'll be, while gathering allies, companions, resources with her. So, practice escape. Maybe she files a restraining order. Maybe she files papers for divorce. Maybe she files a police report. Until finally she effects that escape in the end, the final escape. So this is just sort of giving you the breakdown of what I just explained. So I don't know what our time is like, and I don't know what our technology situation is like.
My technical people left, so I can try again.
Try again.
Okay, I was going to leave on a note of hope. The last little. Sorry.
Where's your mic?
Okay, let me get through here. Let's see if I can. Here we go. There it is. There's the link. Use your imagination.